It has officially been 1 year since the Pacers made one of the bigger trades in franchise history, trading Victor Oladipo away, bringing in Caris LeVert and 2 second-round picks. I want to review with Adam the last year, if the Pacers should have done that trade in retrospect, how Caris has played, how Vic has played, the whole shebang now that it's been a year. All that and more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News. And today, you all thought would be the official start of trade season. When I talk about that, I'm going to put that off till Wednesday. Instead, today, for me talking, is the 16th, for you is the 17th, is the 1 year anniversary of the biggest trade of Kevin Pritchard's time running this team.
No.
One of the biggest trades in the franchise's history, given the impact the player had before being traded. Victor Oladipo out, LeVert, and 2 seconds in. I want to review the year that has been since that deal, if the Pacers should do it, how Vic's played, how Caris has played, how all the parties involved have either thrived or failed since then. And joining me to do that, you've heard his voice on this show so many times, former Indy Cornrows writer extraordinaire, Mr. Adam Friedman. How's it going?
Going well. You overlooked the trade of PG for Oladipo and Sabonis. That's the biggest trade. That if he doesn't make that trade, he doesn't have a job 3 years later.
That is the biggest trade. I don't know why I consider that pre-Pritchard era, because it was the first thing he did.
Yeah, I mean, that was like if he doesn't make that trade to like kind of be decent for the next 3 seasons, he barely doesn't have a job at this point. Like that trade set him up. This other trade was the second most important trade, so you're not like that far off.
That's fair. I did forget when I said that. So yes, a year ago today, it was announced. I mean, it really was in limbo for 4 days. It started the 13th of January, whatever. It became official 1 year ago today. Pacers got LeVert and Cash, who cares, and a second from Houston and a second from Cleveland for Vic. And last year was weird for this team, right? They were playing pretty good at the time, but I mean, we both kind of had talked about all offseason, like how do you move on from Vic? Like our fake trade was Vic for Chris Paul, and that never materialized, obviously, but he played pretty well in those first 10 or so games he played for the Pacers that season, and then 9 games to be exact. And then they decided to deal him, and everybody got why. He had a foot out the door the whole time. He ended up in his preferred destination anyway. The Pacers had liked LeVert since the draft. It was a pretty good swing in general. But now it's been a year, Adam. Do you still feel the same way about the trade now as you did when it happened?
I mean, I think it was the right move. You traded what ended up being a non-asset for an asset, right? So like if you're just looking at in that lens, right? You're not looking at it the lens of Vic was an all-star, an all-NBA player, but as the fact when he reached the point, last year, he was a distressed asset that was making $21 million a year that nobody really wanted to trade for. And so basically you hopped in a trade that somehow the Rockets didn't want LeVert, I guess, and you gave him Oladipo for LeVert. So you turned an asset into something, right? LeVert might not be like the best asset, but he is probably worth something on the open market versus Oladipo at this point was traded last for Kelly Olynyk and I forget somebody else, right? And
yes.
then he got hurt again. So like Oladipo literally is like not worth anything at this point. He might get back there. We should say that, but LeVert is worth something. So in a vacuum, the trade works because you win from going from 0 to 1, let's say, in terms of value.
Yeah, so the Heat got Depot for, I believe it was Olynyk and Avery Bradley. Yes,
okay,
right.
I couldn't remember. I know Olynyk was the key.
And a second-round draft pick swap.
Oh, okay, so three strong assets there.
Crucially important asset. Yeah, they let Olynyk and Avery Bradley walk for nothing 3 months later. So.
Houston, I mean, I guess Houston wanted to rebuild, not have any money, right? That was their goal, and they accomplished that. But like, they basically took on Oladipo, and then they could have taken LeVert for basically nothing, and they could have had like something where they decided to do this whole thing, and they got nothing out of it because I think Olynyk's off the roster. Avery Bradley isn't the second-round pick, is not worth what it's turned. They traded Harden for like nothing, basically a bunch of late first-rounders from the Nets. Anyways,
LeVert would not help them in their situation, I feel like. So like, I get why they didn't want him.
Yeah, but it's an asset.
But I think if they planned on trading Vic anyway, I think that's why they did it, is they thought maybe they could still be good with Vic and Wall.
Well, I think they were trying to sell their fan base that we're not rebuilding, right? We're trading an all-NBA player for an all-NBA player, right? That was the thought. But obviously that was not true. They traded. James Harden isn't good this year, but James Harden is still right now a top, I don't know what you call 40, 50 player, even in his out of shape format. But
from a Pacers perspective, I would say that I still right now think they definitely made the right trade. Like Vic was killing it right at the start of the year last year. Killing it's a bit extreme, but like he was still
he was good. 20 points, I think, in his like 4 or 5 games he played.
20 points a game guy, league average from 3, 6 boards, 4 assists. Not the defender he was before the injury, obviously, but still good, right? So they kind of got lucky that he was that guy for those 9 games, and they were able to do this because he wasn't bad with Houston by any means, but he was definitely worse. Like got down to 40% shooting, 37% with Miami later in the season. His 3-ball went away. His playmaking fluctuated, right? Like the Pacers did get kind of lucky that they got to strike while the iron was hot pretty early in the season. So compared to what I thought of the trade right away, where it's like, okay, LeVert's good, and all these Nets people are really bummed he's leaving because he's good, and they'll miss him. Obviously, they are happy with James Harden, and then the 2 seconds is nice. They get the extra one for the kidney mass discovery, which is a thing we'll talk about later. But I think that I still would say, that was a good trade, but I think of it less now than I did then because I thought at the time LeVert would be a little better fit with what they had, and they've had injuries that have made him do various roles in his time here, and he had the back problems that kept him out for much of this season. So there's a reason he hasn't been as good as he was even when he started here with the Nets. But I think I'd grade it a little lower because he's been a little worse, but I still think I agree with you that even a year later, given especially Vic's trajectory, but even if he had continued on the same path, because he was expiring, they kind of had to do that at some point.
Well, that's the thing. So there's an argument you could make that Vic would have been better with the Pacers because he was in a better situation. And he just fit with the roster they had. They had built a roster kind of around him a couple years before, and building towards it. Like they had a roster that kind of should have melded with him correctly, right? So like he was going to be in a spot where he could shoot pretty well because he maybe wasn't the focus on defense all the time, where he wasn't having to constantly shoot the ball. I don't know how much I took in Houston, but I'm sure it was close to 20 versus probably like closer to 13 would have been his number in Indiana. But the problem with that is if he ends up having a decent season, he's out the door anyways because he was clearly signs that he wanted to go to Miami or somewhere else. So you're kind of stuck in this hard place where it's like, okay, we can keep him and build up his value, but then he's going to leave us anyways, or we can trade him at kind of like this mini boosted value, and then he became what we thought he might be anyways on the worst case scenario. So I think that the trade makes sense. It's just that the other side of it is LeVert just isn't really a fit for this team, and so they got to figure out how to then turn this trade into another trade ultimately, or some move, because it's just not right now. It's not working. I mean, if you look at if you do since the trade, the team is 41-60. Since LeVert played his first game, the team is 32-46. Right. So they're basically one game under 500 when he played last year, and this year obviously they're nowhere near 500.
They're garbage. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
okay,
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
Well, and so when I did the Halfway Point podcast with James Boyd from the Indy Star, that was one of our big takeaways is like these guys just don't fit. Like you can look at even going back last season take Warren out, whatever. He only played 3 games. The other 4 starters that like we expect to be the starters together, they still are like 13 and 20 something. Like it's not good. So they don't fit, and LeVert is a factor there. I think, and I'll talk about LeVert a little more and Depot, honestly, but like even in retrospect, like what's the way that if the Pacers hadn't traded Vic, the best case scenario for them is like he's awesome for them and they make the playoffs. Like he wasn't going to stay. Like he just wasn't, right? There's no like the best case scenario in Magic NBA land is like Vic's awesome for them last year under Bjorkgren, and they make the playoffs and they do okay, and then he re-signs. Like, yeah, that would be better than what is going on right now. But under the guise of he's going to leave for sure, even if they didn't trade him and he stayed the rest of the season and was good and got them more results, they would have lost him for nothing this summer anyway. So even in the best case scenario of not doing the move they did, I would prefer that they have done what they did in terms of like making the asset play. So sure, I don't know what other offers were out there for Depot, so I can't grade the trade compared to stuff I don't know exists. But compared to doing nothing, even now with all these fit issues and stuff, they have 2 seconds to retool if they want to do that. They've got LeVert to move on from if they want to do that. They can even keep him and try to put better stuff around him. He was good last year. He's not been as good this year, right? They have those options that they wouldn't have had before the deal. So even in the best case scenario of not trading Vic, I think they made the right choice. But it's certainly, you bring up that record. It's like it didn't work, but it also was the right play. It's kind of strange.
So you can tell me if I'm wrong because I don't quite remember, but wasn't on the table at one point like a Turner Oladipo for Hayward in November of 20, right? Am I right? Wasn't that like
when
sort of
Hayward
what
was
they
before he went to
isn't
Charlotte?
yeah, isn't that what the Boston wanted
Yes.
theoretically? Right.
Yes.
So I'm thinking you made a case that should have been the move, right? You could have paid Hayward the $30 million that he got paid for in Charlotte. I think he would have taken 30 here. I think that was the issue was you couldn't get the numbers quite as high. And you
That's
probably, I
funny
mean,
because at the time we were both like, no, I would never do that. But if we knew Vic would tail off, you'd be like, yeah, maybe you should.
yeah, well, we were thinking Hayward I think at the time was 4 for 110, I think was sort of how you put that.
Right. Not
If
four
you
for 90
added,
or whatever it was.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you did McDermott Turner, that got you to that number basically.
Right.
So, but I think in hindsight, that might have been the better move was just to
That's a
make
good call.
to put Oladipo because that's what Boston said. I mean, we thought it was unreasonable, right? They wanted Turner, McDermott, and then another asset on top of that, or they wanted like Warren or something. Did the classic Boston thing and asked something insane, and then get screwed at the end of it because they can't re-sign the player, right? They're just classic Boston there. But that might have been the right move because Hayward seems like he's probably of LeVert, Oladipo, and him. He's the best player now. He's on a bigger contract than everybody else. He's expensive. He's older. It could tail off in the last couple of years of the deal. Don't get me wrong, but he's probably he is the best of those three players.
Adam, are you sure Boston messed that up? I mean, all they have to show for it right now is Josh Richardson. I mean, that seems. What would you rather have, Josh Richardson or a bunch of stuff?
Well, remember they got Tristan Thompson, and he was like better than Turner. Like that was they got him for like what $5 million. He's just
forgot
about
about
Turner.
that.
That was the
Everybody
big
said
move.
he was better than Miles for that team. That was
I don't know better, but they're like, well, he's so much cheaper, and he's just as good as Turner. Easily.
Outrageous time. Yeah, they get a trade exception that they use to get Fournier, and then he leaves, so they use that trade exception to get Josh Richardson,
Just
and then extend
downgrading
him for a year.
constantly.
It's like, wait, so yeah, the trail of transactions there got lost in the sauce, but
Boston. I mean, we can talk about bad trades. Boston just completely played its hand for almost every trade in the last 5 years at least.
Well, and credit Hayward, like he could have helped them out, and he's just like, no, I'm not waiting for you guys. This is stupid. Like I can get 120 million right now. Stop.
Well, he's on a team that's fun. I mean, he's kind of the veteran on a young, fun team. I mean, it's gonna work out for him as long as he can stay healthy. And he's kind of been iffy there, but yeah.
So let's talk more about LeVert and Depot and every party really. But first, Adam, I want to talk about the good folks over at Shopify. Cha-ching! It's another sound of a sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. They give entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses. So upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. It's easier to scale your business using Shopify. It's really fantastic for small businesses and even, like yours or mine or whatever. Shopify can power millions of businesses from first sale to full scale, reach customers online and across social networks, and gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. It's more than a store. Shopify grows with you. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get access to Shopify's full suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA right now. Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. So the big pull in for Depot, Adam, was obviously LeVert, right? The second round picks, whatever. They got the extra one because
they're worth nothing. I mean, you have a higher value of them than I do, but I always think second round picks are like having pennies basically.
You know what's funny is in retrospect, like back then I was like, oh, one's from the Cavs, like that could be good, and now the Cavs are great, and now it's not even going to be good.
Mid-40s at least.
Yeah, mid-40s, not something. I mean, the value I place on them is like cap dumps and getting that if you need it kind of stuff. But yeah, in the Pacers situation, they are more useless. And their own second has more value than both of these. So it's actually kind of good they lost their second to Brooklyn last year because they're going to get a much better second this year. Anyway, LeVert's on the team now, regardless of the trade or not. And I think we kind of dabbled on this in the first segment, but has he met the expectations you thought he would reach when they acquired him? Big picture.
See, so I felt the LeVert thing was you had an expectation, then he was out for 8 weeks, right? Give or take. I think it was 8 weeks. 8 weeks, and it was like, okay, now he's to play himself back into shape. We've never seen him with TJ Warren, so we never really knew how that was going to work. And so it's just kind of like, no, we still have it. We didn't see him last year. We still have it. And I'm not sure we honestly might not see it this year either. It sounds like, who knows, frankly. But so it's like he's been, I think, the player that we thought he would be in terms of like he can score a little bit, he can do a little bit, but he's not like, I think when he was filling Oladipo's shoes, you thought, could he be 80% of that, of peak Oladipo? I mean, and he's really not. I mean, he is maybe like 60%. I mean, peak Oladipo was just a player we just haven't seen. They've seen two of them probably in the last two decades, frankly, going back to probably like the 04 teams. They've only had two all NBA type players. And so like, I mean, I think he kind of has because I think you should have not, maybe I had too high of expectations. It's always a problem, but I think he's been fine. It's just that there's been so much issues with coaching before this season, and then there's just the fit and just everything has just been kind of And I don't know if it's all him. I mean, the two centers thing kind of works, but also doesn't work for him. And it just sort of it's become sort of a mess that he's a part of, but he's maybe not like the contributing factor, but he's just a piece of it.
Yeah, LeVert is really hard to analyze right now. Okay, so no, it's not. We watch him every day. We can talk about how he plays, but like, let's zoom out for a second. This guy missed 8 weeks last year with cancer. How many other players in the NBA can you say that about? None, right? Like, it's hard to know how much impact that has on you. Like, he was doing an interview, or he was talking to Scott Agnes after their game on Friday against Phoenix, and it's like he sees scars on his body every day. You know what I mean? Like, from surgery, how many other players can say that? That's a unique thing that makes it hard for me to understand how that changed the way he is as a player. 2, he's played for 4 coaches since the start of 2019, right? 2 for the Nets, then he's traded, so it's Bjorkgren and then Carlisle, right? Like that's a lot of changing demands and requests. He did that public thing talking about Bjorkgren being like, yep, you're playing tonight, and he's like, huh? Like, I don't know how perfect that relationship was either. So as he's evolved as a player and gotten better, his stasis has completely changed over and over and over again. So it's hard to really evaluate, like, how is he getting better or worse? How is his situation getting better or worse for him? Stuff like that. That said, the biggest gap that for me with him is I thought he'd be a much better defender than this. I thought he could be at least decent on defense. It wasn't like great for the Nets or anything, but I thought he was like average, I guess, as a defender for them when I would tune into the Nets, and that Nets team tried really hard for years. And even if you go off advanced stats, like his defensive box plus minus was positive his first 3 years in the league, and with the Pacers, it's been negative, and it's almost -1 this year, right? Like, it keeps getting worse. So I thought his defense was better than it was. That's been the biggest gap. And then when he was in a passing role last year, he was pretty solid, but in general, his finishing is pretty inconsistent. And since he doesn't have the ball as much when Brogdon plays or when they have everybody healthy, it's just he can't pick it. He's not that great at picking his spot. So you combine that with his defense, and he just hasn't been the guy that I thought he would be coming from Brooklyn. Some of that's because of the role he's had here. Some of that's because of the injuries he's had, but he has been, I think, below the expectation that I thought he would give the Pacers.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his like raw numbers, he's basically the same player. I mean, he's a little bit worse from 3-point, but shooting percentage wise, points per game, I mean, it's all within a range, right? 17 to 20, 40, 43 to 44% from the field, 31 to 30. I mean, I guess he had a kind of a spike here in 2019-20 from 3, but usually it's between 31 and 34%, right? It's all kind of been the same. I do think the issue with the Pacers versus the Nets is on those Nets teams, he was on those Russell teams and those kind of like scrappy young teams. He also wasn't starting all the time. I think it was kind of half and half. And so I think LeVert's best role is probably like your bench leader. But it comes to the Pacers, they don't have Warren. They've got injury turmoil, whatever, the last 2 seasons, frankly, especially this year with COVID and stuff. And so he has to be sort of the offensive player, right? He kind of has stepped in, kind of become that, and he's not good at that, right? He'd be a much better kind of smaller role in smaller minutes player where he could be really good in those, I could say 25 minutes, especially leading the bench unit. Whereas a starter, he just isn't up to the level of some of the better shooting guards and really small forwards in the league.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. And I think I agree with that now. I didn't used to. But
no,
I think
we thought he could get to, we thought, oh, this is like the growth, right? And then he'll grow into become this player, but he really kind of, it's more leveled than grown.
So I think right now, like if they had their whole team healthy, I'm never going to assume they will ever again. I'm just pretending.
That's been
just pretend. I think the ideal thing would be they start him, and then 4 minutes in, he's the first sub out and Chris comes in or whoever they decide.
Yeah.
And then he is the bench leader, like you said. And when he was that point guard for the stretch a couple weeks ago when Brogdon was out and they hadn't signed Kiefer Sykes yet, and Brad Wanamaker was just running around doing nothing out there, and they needed LeVert to be the point guard, he did a pretty good job, right? Like that, clearly he's better at that than what he has to do with the starting 5, where his, this year, this is part of the stats we didn't even say. His usage, I believe, is a career low this year. That is not true. I'm sorry. His lowest since 2019-20, though. His lowest in 4 years of usage. That was a mistake for me, but still a lower usage than he's used to, right? And given what he is, where he needs to pound the ball and get to his spots, and he's finishing a career high at the rim when he actually decides to go all the way there, and his passing was really good when he was in that point guard role. Like, it's harder for him to be impactful, especially because he's not shooting well this year when he's off the ball. So it's just a kind of a fit thing, right? Like, that's part of why he hasn't met the expectations of that I had, which again is not his fault necessarily, because there's been some injury stuff going on and role changes going on. But he can't shoot well enough to be off the ball as much, and the Pacers have too many other good players for him to be on the ball as much as he needs to be. So it's just not quite the right fit for him to be the valuable guy they thought they were getting.
Yeah, and I think with the kind of pull at 4 minutes problem is that they want to do it with the center, so it's hard to do it with the guard, right? They don't usually with like a starting lineup, you want to keep at least 4 of them kind of in for long as possible, right? Like you've seen teams, especially the teams that are really good that have like 2 superstars, right? You take like a Durant and Westbrook or Harden and Westbrook, they would stagger them, or Paul and Harden, for example, kind of thing. But it's really hard to pull 2 players out of the starting lineup and switch 2 in, right? And so they already have to stagger with the centers to make that work. That it's really hard to do with the guard. So it's just some of that is that he just like it's just a kind of not. I mean, it's just not a good roster around him, and so he doesn't really make it any better, right? He's not somebody who can kind of exceed the circumstances. He kind of has to fit into them, and when everything else is kind of crumbling around him, he's just kind of going to crumble with it a little bit.
Yeah, and even when he's at point guard, which I don't know if you agree now, but I think we both think that's probably his best role now, right?
Something. I mean, I think there's like he's probably hybrid-ish, right? I mean, I don't think he's a dominant guard all the time, but I think yes, where he's leading the point, bringing the ball up a decent amount would be better for him.
The problem with that is when so Brogdon loves playing point, which like he's better at than LeVert.
They're both kind of the same player, right? They kind of both have it, you know, all the time, but maybe 40% kind of thing.
But when LeVert's playing point, usually that means Brogdon's not in the game because Brogdon likes to be point. So then the other problem this year is what's the ideal situation for LeVert, the ball handler, right? It's Sabonis setting screens and then as much space as you can get in the court. Yep. They're the third worst, fourth worst 3-point shooting team this year, right? So like they can't spread it out as much. So we see in the clutch, especially like if you remember the Chicago game when DeRozan hit the insane one-legged game winner, LeVert, they kept calling his number in these pick and rolls down the stretch, and the Bulls were like, okay, we're just going to send 4 guys to the ball because no one else can hit a 3 in your lineup, and it doesn't matter if he passes, you're not going to score. And it worked. He turned it over twice and missed a shot, and bada bing, bada boom, the Bulls win. Like that is not necessarily his fault on the fit thing. They just don't have the right tools to, even when he is in the right situation, to make him as good as possible. So is LeVert good? Yeah. Is LeVert the right fit for the Pacers after this trade? No. But does he still have value? Yes. That's the summation, I think, of our bullet points here.
Yeah. I mean, I think, are you getting to the point where maybe McDermott was the biggest LeVert was the biggest benefactor of McDermott? Like, because, you know, that kind of spacing and stuff. I mean, remember too, I mean, we're talking about Justin Holiday, who for at least a little while looked like he was like, I don't know, the second coming up to McDermott at one point. And now he's kind of an average. I mean, he's a little above average, but like kind of come back to earth from his 2% season he had 2 years ago. Like there's some of that, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think it's all on him. It's not like he's the reason the Pacers are bad. Right?
No, definitely not.
You can't be like he is the one reason this team is falling apart. It's just that he's just not good enough to like break out of this kind of like team that's sort of just not very good.
This is kind of an interesting philosophical question though. When a guy doesn't fit with the roster, is it his fault or is it the roster's fault?
Well, so he's not like supposed to be the number one guy. So it's
true.
So it's probably
he came in after the rest of the team, so I would say not his fault.
Yeah, I mean, so they built this roster. We could say it around Oladipo ultimately, right? I mean, even with him hurt, it was kind of built to fit around him. I mean, I think they probably should have flipped one of the centers at one point still earlier, but whatever. But that was the idea, right? No, they brought in Brogdon to kind of help kind of play off ball Oladipo occasionally and be point guard sometimes. They had Warren who provides like offensive spark, and then the Sabonis and Oladipo together are legendary, at their best. And LeVert is not the same player as Oladipo. He's not the at least the I'm going to just go to the rim, put my head down, pick and roll, and then I'm going to shoot a bunch of pop-up threes basically and play hard on defense. Like he's just not that player. He's a totally different player, and then the roster doesn't fit with that. It was kind of a bad fit, but like you said, I'm not sure there's a better move. Like, what are you going to do? Trade Oladipo for like Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley? Like that's worse. That is worse. That is actively worse than the Caris LeVert. So the trade, you got to do what you got to do to at least like keep an asset at some point.
They got Brogdon, and they were like, oh, yeah, this guy fits great with Vic. And he does, right? They would have been an awesome defensive backcourt. And they were when they played together for whatever that ended up being.
Like playing off each other, too, in the couple of that Lakers game in the bubble where they played off each other really well for most of the time. Like, that's what would have been nice.
They could both kind of toggle off and on. And they had Vic playing too much off ball. So when Brogdon came in, that fit a lot better. And then the other thing was like Vic could guard the other team's best guard, and Brogdon wouldn't have to do the best guard thing. And that was good. And now with Caris, it's like, okay, Brogdon, your defensive matchup's harder. Your fit starts with your guard. Like, it's just not as good. Let's talk about Vic a little bit and Caris's future after we take a short little break to talk about two wonderful groups of people. First up, the good folks over at Built Bar. It's a new year, which means New Year's resolutions. If you're just about getting fit or eating healthier, include Built Bar in your plan. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or, in my opinion, even better than a candy bar. They make it easy to stick to your resolution because they are super delicious and super healthy. A great substitute for either a snack or a meal. They're only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein, 100% covered in chocolate, and actually delicious, unlike so many other flavors of protein bars. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order of Built Bars. That promo code, again, is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Let's also talk about BetOnline.ag, who would like to wish you a happy betting new year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. Football playoffs going crazy this weekend. Love seeing the Bengals winning them for the first time since I was not even alive, was their last postseason. And BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On when you get started, and you'll get that 50% welcome bonus. They got football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Thank you all for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every day. Big month coming up for the Pacers with trade deadline in less than a month now. Every player in the league can be traded except for a few who got extended. It's going to be a lot to cover with this team in the coming weeks. But for now, we're going to finish up talking about the Caris LeVert trade. And I want to talk about Depot specifically because there was a time with the Rockets where he looked pretty damn good. And then he totally fell off, and then he was terrible with Miami, and now he's been hurt. And it's really hard to assess what he is now or what he can be going forward. I don't know how you feel about the player he is right now, Adam.
This is the last time we saw him play. I'm trying now. I was like late last year, right? April last year. Right. We blew out his knee in like the end of April, May. I'm trying to remember the month exactly. I don't know.
His injury in 2021 was April 8th. Was the last time he suited up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of with him, you could have seen this coming once his kind of athletic, like if you looked at him in the long run, right? He was always a kind of guy who liked to pull up and shoot his three a lot and like to kind of overshoot his three, but he could make up for it because he was so good defensively and get to the rim enough, and he could shoot just enough from three where it would be like, okay, it's worth him taking that. But you figured once his athleticism started to wane, he just relied on that 3-point shot, and he just wasn't like a knockdown enough 3-point shooter to rely on that, and that's kind of what he sort of was becoming, I think. Even with the Pacers, you kind of saw that for a little bit. I mean, he shot well from three, so it looked okay. But then the Rockets, when it started to fall off, it's because the 3-point shot fell off. So, I mean, I don't really know how he reinvents himself. I mean, I will say he has a pretty good, like, looking jumper, so, like, he could shoot better from it, right? It's not like he has this, like, weird hit shot or doesn't, like, looks better. Like, he can quick release, get the ball up, and so that should help if he kind of can play off the ball with Butler and Bam and stuff like that in Miami. But I don't know. I kind of think we basically saw that one best year of him, and that's going to be the last time we see him even close to that ever again.
Yeah, guys who have crazy knee injuries, like I tend to think they come back with a lot better shooting form, which sometimes can help them. And he shot well it was only 9 games, but he shot well in that sample in 2020, 21 before he got dealt. And like Jeremy Lamb shot 40% from three when he came back from his ACL thing, right? Like sometimes for guys, when the only motion they can do is arm stuff, they just really iron out their shot. So I think he'll still be a good shooter. And you're right. I agree. He's got good form, but he won't have that burst that made him so good. Like even in year 2 with the Pacers before he got hurt, that was a little bit lacking because he was dealing with knee stuff that year. But I mean, that first year with the Pacers, it doesn't matter who's guarding him. He can get all the way to the rim and finish like every single time.
It was an Isaiah Thomas level year, or the second Isaiah Thomas, not the first one. But
here's Vic's shooting from 0 to 3 feet by season of his career: 55%, 57%, 57%, 61%. 69%.
Yeah, so that 17-18 year was insane.
60, 44, and this is confusing because he played for 3 different teams. It looks like 54. I don't know whatever. Clearly that year, like he had it all. He had that crazy workout stuff after he got dealt and was awesome for the Pacers. I don't think there's any way he's ever back to that good. Do you think he could ever be the guy he was in the 9 games he was for the Pacers last season before he got dealt?
I mean, I think in the right situation where he is not the dominant defensive focus, he could be kind of, I don't know if he can score 20 points a game over 9 games, but could be 15 points a game over 9 games kind of thing. It's going to be hard for him because what made him, like I said, we go back to that 69% from inside 3 feet. I mean, he was like amazing around the rim. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a Pacer player finish at the rim that well, to be honest. Like PG wasn't even that good around the rim for most. Nope. I think he got better late in his career. Has he gotten better recently? I haven't looked at the numbers really know he's got. But like he was afraid to do that. But Oladipo was like fearless. It was Russell Westbrook level kind of fearlessness to go to the rim that he had, and if you lose that mentality, like you're afraid to go to the rim, it's kind of it. Like we've seen with Westbrook, he at least isn't afraid, right? He no longer is afraid to keep going to the rim constantly, and that's what's kind of I think led him because he had injury problems too. He had meniscus tears and stuff like that, but he kind of kept his career a little longer in his peak going because he was just willing to continue to take contact. Where Oladipo, I think, is starting to look like he was starting to shy away from that, and that's kind of it. Unless he can start making his 3-point shot at 40%, he's just not going to. He's just never going to be even probably like 60% the player that he was that year.
PG's career best at the rim is 67%.
But that's late Clippers, or
that is the MVP level year with OKC when he proclaimed himself.
Okay, but see, he in Indiana. What was his peak in Indiana? Give me the number.
He had 66% his rookie year, which is crazy because he never got close to that again. He got to 63 once.
So. What was his shots percentage from inside 3 feet in those years? I mean, it was bad. I remember like there were discussions like, why does he go to the rim enough? He's the 6'9".
Yeah, only 1/5 of his shots basically.
Right, and he was 6'9" and could basically beat anybody on the dribble. Like almost like I mean, there was all discussion about like why wasn't he going to the rim enough? I mean, the spacing wasn't great, which was part of it, but it still didn't make a lot of sense considering his size.
Yeah, so I don't know if Vic will ever be as good as he was. I think he can help the Heat, and the Rockets got their benefits are gone unless this draft swap for them is awesome. So it's hard to discuss the deal from their point. The Heat might end up being the winners because they have full bird on Vic next offseason.
Well, also they do have nothing for him, so he gets something they win basically.
If he's good for them this year and they're over the cap next year and they can sign him to whatever they want, yeah, they're the winners.
Not even good, just like can play like the 7th man role. Honestly, yeah, the value he's being paid this year, that would be worth it.
So let's close up on the Pacers side. I get this. I mean, LeVert's only got 1.5 years left on his deal. I mean, the Pacers like who is just Bojan? Is that the only like really positive starter that in the KP era that's just run out their deal with this team?
You mean like okay, so
Thad Young and Bojan did actually more people than I thought. Never mind. I was going to say, do you think there's any way Caris gets to the end of his deal without being dealt?
No, I think the chances are below 10%.
I agree. So I think that this string of transactions is incomplete for the Pacers. Yeah. Like I think we could look back on the Vic trade and go, okay, they actually got a year plus of LeVert plus whatever they end up getting for him whenever they decide to move on from him.
The one positive thing is that it might have finally accelerated we need to finally rebuild a little bit. Like I'm not saying full tank, but like we finally need to like actually discuss like what do we want out of this team in the next 5 years? How do we get to a point where we can get a top, let's call it even 25 player because I don't think Spence is there. Like, you know what I mean? And that might be the benefit of the Oladipo trade, where I think with Oladipo, there's always the care that, oh, well, if he just comes back and gets close to where he was, we're going to be good again. And it was always that kind of carrot out there. And now that's gone. And now it's like, we see what this team is. It's, we're in the 4th or 5th iteration of it. And it's bad and it's doesn't fit. And it just needs to be like a pretty significant change. I mean, you're going to get a good draft pick. Maybe you get the 1 pick if things go right, or a top 3 pick or whatever. And then you've got to figure out how you build around that. What assets you think are good right now? And then like Sabonis or Turner is one of those assets because they're still really young. And then go from there. I mean, that's what they have to do. And LeVert at least accelerates that versus like leaving this kind of carrot out there that you can grab.
Yeah. The LeVert's kind of in a similar spot to Turner to me in that he's good. And I understand why they would maybe be like, yeah, we can fit some pieces around him. And he fits okay enough with Duarte, whatever. But I say he's in the Turner situation because they have 1.5 years left on their deal. And that if you keep him past the deadline, their value goes way down immediately, right? Because I guess on draft night they have some value, but
I think they probably have value through this offseason still a little bit, right? I mean, still some decent players.
To me.
Yeah. I mean, they're decent players, right? Like it'd be different if they were just like bad players and then you're trying to trade them. Like somebody's going to be like, well, if we get that guy and he's our 5th or 4th guy, we can make it work. I mean, I think nobody's going to be like, trading real strong assets for him, but I could see like super late first or maybe a player swap of some kind that kind of works for both teams could happen with either of those guys, frankly.
That's why I think Caris, the move would if you want to move on from him, or if you think that's going to be an option in the next 13 months, you would like to do it now if you're them, because you'd get the most back, or at least have the least risk. Like he's not hurt right now and stuff like that. So I would definitely be thinking about it. If I were them, I get why they wouldn't. But I mean, to me, he's the 2nd or 3rd most likely guy to get dealt just for that reason alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they're 15 to 28. What's the point of what's the point?
I think the obvious move is try to trade those guys for more shooting. I mean, if you're not taking a draft pick because you decide you don't want to take late, which I could see them saying we want to kind of stay good. I know. I see you rolling your eyes about that, but I see which shooting. I mean, just try to find, even if it's like not every player they just need like some shooters so they can space around some of their better players, because that is like it just deteriorated, frankly, from the team 3 years ago. Super success because they shot so well from three. They had an amazing bench unit 3-point shooters, and that carried them to like a really a superb, frankly, 2019-20 season outside of that stupid playoff run.
Yeah, Justin's 3-pointer deteriorating. It screwed them. They have no reliable none.
McDermott, getting rid of McDermott.
Miles
is really,
has hit 3 threes in the year 2022.
I think McDermott. I mean, I think they should have probably figured out how to keep him and move something else. I mean, that was their issue, and they didn't really. They kind of went McConnell a little bit, and I don't know. It seems like you could have found a piecemeal for that point guard spot, and maybe try to use that money, some other money to piece together to make it work. But they didn't try that.
Yeah. I think we said that. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was like, they need a point guard more, so they'll probably keep McConnell, but McDermott's like better, right?
And I think we underestimate, and we've seen it, how easy it is to get a point guard. You can find, there's so many good guards in the league. Not as easy, but you can find, there's so many guards you can bring in and find that eventually you'll be able to find a kind of an okay backup point guard, right? I don't think
Kiefer Sykes is okay right now.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. You can see that if you just keep bringing in guys, you'll hit on one eventually, because there's just so many of them, and it's such a deep position in the league versus overpaying for a backup point guard who I think when he's healthy is pretty good, but just shooting is just 10x more value than that would be.
It obviously looks bad now because they're terrible that they spent $9 million on a reserve, but they went 500 in the month of November and clearly figured out some stuff. And then McConnell got hurt December 1st, and they have been trash since then. And obviously the correlation is not all the causation.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but
so much has gone on. The COVID outbreak screwed them in their only kind of cushy schedule part. I get it, but I don't think it's a complete lack of correlation that McConnell went down and they've won 6 games since then, 5 games.
That's probably fair. I just think the shooting is just
yes,
it's just painful to watch, I guess, just how bad
it shouldn't be killer, but they insist on occasionally using him with another guard, and then he can't do anything. He's just standing in the corner. So that's not as good. To tie up with LeVert, though, I think, the 1-year anniversary of this trade, still potentially incomplete to fully grade it. And I think they did a good job in the situation they were in last year to hop in on that Harden stuff. And, obviously Caris has missed a bunch of games and stuff like that have hindered the possibility of him being as good as he possibly could. But I still think that they made the right choice, and they have a chance to continue to make it a better choice.
Yeah, and if you think about it, because you can go back, right? So this whole trade starts with the PG trade, right? And they probably got the most out of a superstar trade, in the last 5-10 years, right? I'm trying to think of a super trade that actually worked out better for a team.
They did very
actual assets, right? If any of the first, the Boston one is one I think of, and that was the Boston Nets one from 10 years ago, but that was a really just stupid Nets trade. It wasn't even a superstar trade. They got 2 legitimate players that were good for a period of time for the Pacers that were all-star level players, frankly.
2 all-star years out of Oladipo, plus the 2 Caris seasons, plus 2 seconds, plus 2 all-star seasons out of Sabonis, and TBD on the rest of his seasons. 2 before that weren't coming. So
they did very well. Yeah, they did well on that trade. And so if you view it in that context, they basically turned, let's call it $1 into 80 cents, versus when most teams get 20 cents on their superstar dollar. And then they turned the other 40 cents into 30 cents because he's now worth 4 cents. So it's they're winning these trades individually. The problem is they're just being in spots where they have sort of not built this great roster from going back to 2015 that then screwed them for the last so on, because they had to do all this new stuff to make it work.
Obviously, Vic could be very good. Is he worth 4 cents right now? I mean, he's played in the year.
I don't know. I was just okay. Maybe he's worth 2. I mean, he's probably, you have to pay someone to take him.
He's on the minimum. It's not a big deal, but yeah. I mean, that's a low value.
But I mean,
I have no other stray thoughts on this unless you do, because I know you came prepped with the notes.
No, I think, like you said, in a vacuum, the trade worked. It's just the team is just not that good, and it's not all Caris' fault, but he's a piece of it at least.
They have a lot of good gambles on their team, and they don't necessarily fit that well together. And that's got to be the focus: is who fits together and who can play the way Carlisle wants to play, which clearly needs more shooting than they have on the team right now. Any other wing defender wouldn't hurt as well. I got nothing else today. You can follow this show at Locked On Pacers and me at TEastNBA. He is on Twitter at FriedmanM5. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you tomorrow to talk Clippers.